Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. I hope you're doing well. Today, I'm bringing you part one of my interview with Guillaume, a polyglot language teacher and language enthusiast from Belgium. We talk a bit about the complex linguistic situation in Belgium before we dive into Guillaume's personal stories of struggling to learn languages and how he overcame that and what worked for him. I just want to note that you will hear Guillaume speaking in two of Belgium's official languages at the beginning of this episode, but not to worry, we do go back into English around minute 3. So if you're not understanding, that's okay, you can skip ahead, but I hope you will listen and just take in how those languages sound, and I hope that you guys enjoy hearing more languages on a podcast that is about bilingualism. So you can let me know either in my email at tfibpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at thefutureisbilingual. Now let's get to the interview. Welcome, Guillaume, to The Future is Bilingual. I'm so happy you are a guest today and to have some of your time. So please, why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Heather, and thanks a lot for having me. I was really looking forward to this. I'm really super excited about this and
Likewise.
To be on your podcast. And I've been following it, and I just love the kind of discussions that you have with the people that you invite. So my name is Guillaume. Et comme mon nom l'indique, je suis francophone. En général, quand on parle d'être francophone, les gens pensent souvent que je viens de France. Tous les francophones ne viennent pas de France.
Ouais, c'est super important à dire. Ouais. Il y a tout un monde.
C'est ça, parce qu'il y a aussi des francophones en Belgique, il y en a au Québec, il y en a
en Afrique, en Asie.
Voilà, en Afrique.
Même en Amérique du Sud, il y a la Guyane.
C'est
donc,
ça. Donc,
surtout beaucoup d'îles.
Il y en a un peu partout, les francophones. On y va, on y va.
La francophonie est très riche. J'ai toujours aimé enseigner quels sont les pays, quelles sont les cultures et tout ça à mes étudiants parce que c'est hyper riche et malheureusement, la plupart des livres se concentrent sur la France et c'est vraiment dommage. On fait un petit tour de toutes les villes en France, mais on fait rien. Ou peut-être il y a un chapitre qui dit « Ah, et en Belgique, on parle français ». Fini.
Ouais, exactement. Et en fait, bizarrement, je n'habite même pas dans une commune francophone. Hein. J'habite en Flandre, mais près de Bruxelles. Voilà, la géographie et culture belge est un petit peu particulière. Donc moi, j'habite en Flandre. En daarom spreek ik ook Nederlands. Dus dat is een van de officiële talen van België. En ik spreek wat we Vlaams noemen. Dus dat is een soort van dialect van de taal van Nederland, van het Nederlands. En dat wordt in België gesproken. En het heeft een andere uitspraak en een paar andere woorden. Donc ça, c'est du flamand. Donc ça, c'est le dialecte du néerlandais qu'on parle en Belgique. Et c'est donc la langue qu'on parle là où j'habite, bien que j'habite dans une commune qu'on appelle entre guillemets à facilité. C'est comme ça qu'on l'observe. Hein. Dans la ville, on parle français et néerlandais. Les deux sont mélangés.
J'ai une question pour toi. Alors, je sais qu'il y a le néerlandais du Pays-Bas, des Pays-Bas et le néerlandais de la Belgique. Donc, est-ce que vous comprenez? Est-ce qu'il y a des différences? Je ne connais pas trop. Et aussi avec l'afrikaans, parce que j'ai entendu que ce sont des dialectes similaires. Est-ce que tu peux nous expliquer un peu?
So basically, the differences between Flemish and Dutch, it is, well, to my ears, it's a rather difference of pronunciation because you can hear from the start, when you speak Dutch, you can hear that I don't have the Dutch accent. I have the Flemish accent, which is specific to Belgium. And in Belgium, well, it's a small country, but you have tons of like dialects of varieties of the language, especially regarding Dutch. Like if you go from one city to the other, you will have a different kind of Dutch.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I rather speak. Well, you have to like kind of to live in the country to know that kind of varieties. So I speak a really standard Flemish. I don't speak like with a specific accent. It's rather pure, and so it's mainly pronunciation between Flemish and Dutch. There are a few words or expressions that change, but it's mostly, to my ears, pronunciation. So about 6 years ago, I had an Erasmus in the Netherlands, in Groningen, so in a city in the very north of the country. And I also traveled in the country, in the Netherlands. And so I heard, not all accents, of course, it's not possible to have heard every variety of the language, but I did get accustomed to how it's pronounced. And when you're not used to hearing Dutch from the Netherlands, you might have some difficulties at first to understand how they speak, how they pronounce. But in the end, it's just like some rules that you have to get accustomed to. And so basically, with a bit of practice and a bit of listening, you just get there and you understand. So it's mainly pronunciation. Like a word that I would say, the Flemish word, which is gedaan, which means finished. In the Netherlands, they will say gedaan.
Oh, that's more.
Gedaan. And my accent, gedaan. Their accent, gedaan. Another big difference is for the word but, which in Dutch, in Flemish, it's maar. They say maar.
Oh, it's kind of the opposite. So you guys have some of the raspier sounds at some points where they have it in other. Okay.
They have, so it's kind of big difference when you're not used to it, but then you just, when you hear it a lot, you just get it. But so what is funny with Dutch is that they have so many ways of pronouncing the R sound. I worked on when I was at university, I had a class with, I am a Germanic student. So I studied Germanic languages in English and Dutch with literature, with linguistics and stuff. And I had to compare a movie in Dutch and a movie in Flemish, like the same movie, but with a different pronunciation. And some movies do have different audio files according to the sort of Dutch you're listening to. And I had to transcribe, I don't remember, 10, 15 minutes of the movie and show the differences in pronunciation, in vocab and expression between the two.
Wow, 10 minutes is long for transcribing. That's like pages.
I don't remember how much time exactly.
Well, it depends how long they talk.
That's it. It was lengthy enough to make a big work and really have like interesting conclusions. And I noticed that in Flanders, you don't use that many different R's, like varieties of the word, of the way to pronounce R. But in the Netherlands, they use other type of R's. And in total, you have between 4 and 5 ways to pronounce R. You have R, you have R, you have the R, like the Spanish R, you have the ruled Spanish R that I have never been able to make. You have the R sound from English. You might even have some other weird way, depending on maybe people's native language.
Wow.
So, but they all mean the same. Like there is no difference between. It's not like the short or rolled R in Spanish that can mean but or dog. The examples we all know.
Because there's minimal pairs. If there's only that one sound that makes a difference, then it's an important sound for the language.
That's it. And so in Flemish and Dutch, you just use whichever one you like, and the person in front of you, according to the level they have, they might or might not understand you, but generally natives will get it. If I speak like someone from Groningen to one of my students, French speakers, they will have a hard time at first.
Just quickly, would you say that the differences between the Dutch spoken in the Netherlands and the Dutch spoken in Belgium is kind of like British and American English, how there's pronunciation, but it's mutually comprehensible mostly? Like there's obviously vocab that changes. So sometimes people are confused, like the boot of the car, we don't say that, we say the trunk. The lorry, we say truck. There's all those examples. The flat, for us, flat is just an adjective. It's not an apartment. But like it's mostly still comprehensible.
I would say that the main differences are pronunciation, but you can understand both. Like I think it could even be compared to the varieties of Portuguese, like from Brazil and from Portugal. So I speak the Portuguese from Brazil. I wouldn't say I understand every dialect or every types of pronunciation because there are so many of them because of the size of the country. And at first, the first time I listened to pronunciation from Portugal, I was like, what the hell is that? But actually with using subtitles and with like a bit of practice, I got it. And when you understand like, okay, this sound is pronounced that way, but it's the same word, like you get it.
There's patterns.
That's it, pattern. You recognize these patterns, especially when you're into language learning, you just know how to observe that kind of things.
Yeah.
So, but
we definitely get better the more we do it. We're like, oh, okay, this is this, everything kind of fits in its place and then it gets easier.
So I would say that it could be compared to these languages that have different pronunciation according to where you are. So American, British, and stuff. I'm not sure there are so many differences regarding vocab, but I think that a native with a good knowledge of the two variants of Dutch could answer this question better than I could, because I'm not a native speaker. My native language remains French, but I think that the differences in vocab are not big. Maybe they have different expressions. There are some words that are different, but it's mainly pronunciation, I would say.
So maybe before we talk about other languages, tell us just a little bit about, what it was like growing up in Belgium, this country that is divided. It's divided geographically, right? Like the bottom half towards France is French speaking versus the top half, which, there's like Wallonia and Flanders. Just tell us a little bit, like, what was that like? Did you have to learn Dutch?
Yeah.
Did Dutch have to learn French? Like, just tell us all about that situation, just for anyone out there that maybe doesn't know.
Yeah, because it's such a small country that some people like have very. I spoke recently with people from France. I showed a map of the weather in Belgium. Like in that city, there is this weather and stuff, and I said, "Where is Brussels?" They guessed. They were like a couple, like dozen kilometers apart from where Brussels really is, but some said it was in Liège, some said it was in Antwerp. It's a small country, but we sometimes don't really know it well, even if we don't live that far. So in Belgium, we have Flanders, which is the part where Flemish is the official language. We have Wallonia, which is donc, la Wallonie in French. So that's where people speak French. And then you have Brussels, which is mostly French speaker, but, and here comes the logic behind it, it is in Flanders. So you have a French-speaking city in a Dutch-speaking city. So that's a bit the funny part.
Yeah.
And then
it carries both identities in that sense.
Well, identity is a tough topic in Belgium and related to language.
Yeah.
And so at the kind of the border between Brussels and Flanders, you have what we call in French les communes à facilité, which are like cities where, because of this border, the language border, both languages are accepted, used, and so on by most people. Some only speak one, but both can be used anywhere in shops and so on. And so where I live in Zaventem, it is not seen as this commune à facilité. So it is Dutch speaking, but many people speak French here. And if you go to a shop and you speak French, you won't have any issue. But if you go to change your ID card in like an official place, there you will be required to use Dutch. And I already had issues when I could not speak Dutch yet, and I could only speak French. I relied on my parents to help me out because they do speak Dutch.
Did you always live in that area?
Yeah,
in
I've
Flanders?
never moved out. I have moved out when I went on Erasmus, but I have never lived in another city of Belgium.
Okay. But French was your native tongue because your parents
French
are
is
French
totally
speakers?
native language. My family also, it's like everybody's native language in my family. But due to the situation of the country and due to the usefulness of speaking several languages in Belgium and close to Brussels, my entire family, more or less, is more or less trilingual. And when I mean trilingual, I mean they can have a discussion and work with the two other languages, or when I mean the two others, Dutch, but also English, which is not an official language, but is still widely used and very useful. So we all have a working knowledge of Dutch and of English, except for one of my sisters who I don't really know what the real level is, but she's like extremely good in Dutch, so that helps her enough. And
She
so
can get
we
by.
have, she can get by. And so we have, we also have German as an official language, but I could not say how many people speak it because it's people speak German in a tiny parts of the country, close to next to the border with Germany, and in Brussels you don't really hear German, except for in that place in close to Germany, you will not really hear much German.
But it's recognized as an official language.
Yeah, it is an official language, and when the king like speaks to the public, to the folk, to the people, normally he speaks in French, in French, Dutch, and German, and not in English.
Wow!
But it's honestly, you go to Brussels, you will hear much more Spanish or Italian, or even Arabic and Chinese than German, because it's just not the place where people speak German. So I speak German, not at a very high level, but I have a working knowledge. I never need it, never. It's and even they speak English very well, so we would just switch to English.
Yeah.
It's a bit like in Switzerland, where you have Romanche, which is, so they have 4 official languages. Romanche is one of them. Maybe 1% of the country speaks it. Right. I've never heard that language in Switzerland, and I lived there for 6 weeks. I've never heard that language spoken. I
still think it's good to protect. We're protecting this language with the official status. I think it is an important political step, because we do need the government to be behind a lot of these language initiatives for them to have a real impact. It's not enough for just people in their houses to want to do something. You need a bigger movement. So they might not be the most widely spoken, but at least there's a movement behind to preserve these languages that are native. And I know that is coming back in France as well. All the regional languages like Breton, Provençal, and all those, Alsacien. I think it's a good move, compared to 100 years ago, when we were trying to wipe that all out and everybody just speak French. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
But actually, in Brussels, I couldn't speak for cities outside of Brussels, because regarding school system, I don't know how it works. But in Brussels, you can usually, when you are in a big school where you have a choice of which classes you want to follow, in Brussels, you have to study English and Dutch. And you can also, if you really are into language learning, you can choose other languages such as German, Spanish, might be also Italian, but I'm not entirely sure. But so you can choose these languages. And so when I was studying, I followed classes with people who were studying in order to teach German in schools. Okay. So it is taught, you have the choice. In the school where I went to small schools, so we only had English and Dutch, but in other schools you would have German too, or at least you could choose. There is no obligation to follow German classes, but you can if you wish to in certain schools.
So what age do they start teaching kids these other languages? Let's say these maybe not the language that they speak at home. So if you're a francophone, the French in Wallonie, when do they start teaching Dutch or English? And same for Flanders for French.
It depends very much on where you are in Belgium. So between Flanders, Wallonia, and Brussels, it depends.
Okay, there's not one set age.
No,
not everybody starts it.
There are different parts of Belgium, and therefore laws can also differ according to language, which language is spoken where. Things will change. In Brussels, I will speak about my case, and I suppose that things haven't changed ever since. You begin learning Dutch generally when you're about 8-9 years old, in your third year of primary school. So you have Dutch, and then in the third year of secondary school, you will have English. And every year you would have, every week you would have 4 hours of that language every week. So in my case, at the end of my secondary school, so when I was 19, I had already had about 9 to 10 years of English classes. And some of my classmates could hardly utter a sentence in Dutch. This language system is quite difficult, and it's not really excellent. But that's the case in many countries also.
Yeah, it's not specific to Belgium for sure.
It's not specific to Belgium.
No. Many people suffer that, where they've done years of a language and then they still can't answer a basic question. Even with my Spanish students, I would joke that sometimes I would come in the class in the morning and I would say, "Buenos dias, chicos," and they would say, "Bien, gracias." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're in Spanish too."
To do. Yeah.
So it's always funny, What are we here for? I don't know.
But it's a complicated topic because it's also related to motivation. I had no motivation whatsoever before my 16. I had no motivation to learn languages when I was a kid. It really began when and that's a whole story that I would love to share.
Yes, please.
Maybe a bit later. But it's just funny how I got into language learning because I used to be a polynot, so someone who is not good at language learning. And so you usually begin learning English when you're in your third year of secondary school, and that's about 15 years old, I would say, 14, 15. So basically, you have 6 years more of Dutch than of English. And weirdly, students usually speak better English at the end of the studies than Dutch, and they have had 6 years more of Dutch, but usually it disappears of the brain. Like, progress is quite slow in Dutch. But not
are they watching TV in English? Like, are they consuming other things in English that are helping?
English, yes, in English, because if you watch series, like if you go on Netflix, you have English. Like, but of course, you have other language possibilities on Netflix, but usually they watch English more. But it's also
they're engaging with English more.
And actually Dutch speakers engage with English way more and with French way more than French speakers. So basically, when you live in Flanders, you will watch Dutch channels which offer English movies with Dutch subtitles. Things are not so much doubled. They are in the native language, only with English, of course, subtitled in Dutch. And therefore, that way they get to listen to English very early on.
And they understand by reading. Yeah, my Dutch friend said the same about the Netherlands. He said everybody speaks great English because they don't put voiceover. So you hear English, read Dutch, and you understand. Whereas, in France, things are always voiced over. Poland too, they're always putting the same man reads every single foreign movie. But yeah, I think that's a huge not a hindrance, but it's very helpful to have the audio and then you're reading the subtitles. And of course that's tiring, which is probably why they do voiceovers. People don't want to have to read for 2 hours during a movie.
But it's a bit of a cultural thing between the two parts of Belgium. Well, the two main parts, without necessarily speaking about Brussels, like between Flanders and Wallonia. That's a cultural thing. And so in Wallonia, you would not have movies doubled. You would rather have. You would have the thing in French without subtitles. That's it.
You'd have French audio, right?
Yeah. So French speakers are less in contact with Dutch because someone from Wallonia will likely never have heard about musicians from like Dutch-speaking musicians or Dutch-speaking actors or channels. It's before that I really got into Dutch, I knew nothing about the language, like about any singer, any music, any movie, any accents, any channel. You just don't watch it. Sometimes you have it because of your package on TV, but you don't watch it. And regarding Dutch speakers, I think they have more. Do they have more options? I'm not sure, but they do watch English channels more. They just have more content with it, more contact with it. But French speakers, they will not watch something in Dutch, and movies in English, it might be doubled instead of subtitles.
Right.
But I can only speak about the situation from Brussels because I don't really know how they do in like every city in Flanders or in Wallonia. But from what I've heard from people from the two sides of the country, there is a big cultural difference. And for example, a few years back, a minister wanted, and that was her goal. She wanted to revolutionize the way we learn languages in Belgium. And she said, everybody bilingual by, was it 2000? So 21 years ago. Ever since, nothing has changed, nothing at all. And what's funny is that I am not even allowed, so because of my diploma, so I studied to become a teacher of Dutch. And I think that I would not be allowed to teach French as a French speaker in Flanders.
Why?
But I teach Dutch. I am native French speaker. I have the knowledge of grammar and of linguistics. I am I would say I'm rather an educated person who has been to university, and still I am not allowed to do that.
Would you
I
need a
cannot teach.
certification? Or...
It's a question of that, and yeah, I just think that some things are not necessarily very logical. So I cannot teach.
Well, we
Dutch
have plenty of examples of that as well. Like I'm from a very small state, Massachusetts, and you can drive through it within an hour, north to south. And I live on the border with Connecticut, and I can't teach in Connecticut. I'd have to take another test, pay another $150 to take a test, maybe pass it, hopefully pass it, if I wanted to teach in that state. So even though I live 5 minutes from a border, it's not like we have like a regional test that you take. Each state has their own, which that works fine if you're in California, if you're in Texas. These states are huge. But when we're in these small states, I feel like we should have like a New England test so that, if I pass it, I can teach in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, which is right next door. It's just that also, I was looking for jobs once and I didn't take the Connecticut because I was like, I don't want to take another test. I already have my Massachusetts license. So yeah, there's lots of illogical parts, especially with teaching. I feel like they put us through a lot.
But it's very sad because I really wanted to teach French as a native speaker to Dutch-speaking students, but couldn't. So I can only teach to French speakers, not being a native speaker of Dutch. So it's sad because if you really want to have bilingual students, so a country that is bilingual and you want everybody to speak both, or even just to speak about French and Dutch. I'm not even speaking about German because already having a bilingual country, having people who speak both Dutch and French is difficult. We can't even do it now. Right. So adding a third language, that would be nice. But let's imagine that you could have a system where you have, in order to teach Dutch, you would have speakers of Dutch, like native speakers of Dutch, teaching Dutch to French speakers, and you would have French-speaking teacher teaching French to Dutch speakers. Yeah. Imagine already that is a big difference because the only native speakers I've ever met as a student, so me following like, let's say, a Dutch class given by a native Dutch speaker, I only had that at university. I've never had that in school. Yeah. And still I live close to the border. So if I bike or drive for 15 kilometers, I am in the center of Brussels. It's a very small country, and still, so I am in the border. So I am surrounded by speakers of both languages, and still you cannot find you do not allow to have a native speaker teaching their language. It's sad because if you really want students to be bilingual, just give them a native speaker who has to follow an immersion program.
From a young age. If they started it at the littlest, 6-year-old.
Well, it doesn't always work. In my situation, and we will maybe cover it later on. In my situation, I followed the Dutch-speaking school system as a kid. So I already heard Dutch when I was 5 years old, maybe even sooner. And nevertheless, I couldn't speak Dutch until my 19.
Wow.
It took me 15 years to begin to reach kind of A2 B1 in Dutch. And I was in a Dutch-speaking school for 4 years. And then I went to a French-speaking school because my Dutch was not good enough.
Were the other kids around you speaking French or Dutch? What was the situation linguistically?
I think that the teachers spoke Dutch. The students, I think, was a bit of both. It was still a Dutch-speaking school, but French-speaking parents will likely put their kids, or some will put their kids in a Dutch-speaking school to have their kids to hear Dutch at school, but not all of them do it, of course. So it really depends on where you are, which school you are, what kind of family you're from. But it really depends. And in my case, I was very sad that I couldn't make the most of it, I had kind of that immersion. And nevertheless, I could not learn it. And I had kind of a blockage. I don't know if there was a specific word for that in English.
Like a blockage. We could say a blockage. Yeah.
I had that for years, and my parents tried everything to they thought that I would have a click. Let's say that you go to, they tried to send me to sports camps in Dutch, only Dutch, and they thought there will be a clicks at a moment and Dutch will spring back to your head, because they thought that it was somewhere like hidden in the back of my head, and that I still had it somewhere, because when you're confronted with a language from a young age, it just does not normally disappear. So they thought that something would happen, and I dreamt it would happen, because I thought if only I could speak even one sentence that language. It ended up being a dream, actually, to being able to speak. That I thought for many years, I thought I would never be able to speak. It was an impossible language with extremely complicated grammar. That's what I thought. That's what everybody thinks. It's not the case, but it's what people think. And it just changed.
So what happened between 5 and 19? Like, you know, and also I'm curious, you know, you said you have this block. So could you understand Dutch, but just not produce it? Were you understanding what was happening when you were in school, and if kids were talking, the sports camp?
I think I was not even trying to understand, because I did not like the language. I didn't feel like I wanted to speak it. You know, I was just like everybody, hoping to speak a language without having to learn it. That's what students hope now. But so I followed the French-speaking school system from about 7 or 8 years old until the end. And you know, the whole thing. Actually, I had my first rebirth in my life when I was about 16 years old, and it was my 4th year at secondary school. That was my 2nd year of English, because we start in the 3rd year. In some schools, you start in the 1st year, so it depends. And in my 1st year of English, I did like it. I had a nice teacher, so I had about 14 out of 20 on average, which is not bad. And then the next year, I noticed that there was a leveling up, that there was a difference, because I had another teacher who, so the teacher I had my 3rd year was someone who taught in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd year. The teacher you have in your 4th year, these teach in 4th, 5th, and 6th like years. So they basically teach to like older students. And so of course, level changes, psychological changes, well, everything is different. And the level was way too high for me. I was like completely drowned. And I failed in English. So in the 3rd year, I succeeded. In the 4th, I failed. And I remember it was Easter. And you know, you have this kind of meeting with the teacher, the parents, and the kid. And you try to imagine, like, find out a way to help the kid. My teacher said to my parents, you know, your son has been failing my class the whole year. And she's like direct, like she will not like try to be like to find words to like be kind. No, she like,
just cut to the chase.
That's
cutthroat.
And so she told me, either he succeeds for the exam, like 50% of the grade, and just let him go to the next year, or he fails.
Oof.
And when she said fail, it's like he deserves to have to say this year again, like to stay in the same year, because he doesn't have the level to go to the next one.
Right.
And then while driving back home, I told my mother, well,
wait, were you present at the conference?
Yeah, we were.
Oh, in America, the kids are not there. It's just parents.
We are, but usually teachers and parents talk, and the kid just listens.
Oh, see, our parent-teacher conferences, they leave their kids at home.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so then you can actually be more frank. Like the parents will say, like, this is what's happening at home. Here's some issues, and the kid's not there. Like, we're not talking about him in front of him per se.
It might depend on the school or on the on where you are, the city and stuff. But here it was with the kids. And so while driving home, I talked with my mom and I said, well, what am I going to do? I've never been able to succeed. Well, this year I couldn't succeed. It's impossible. I hated that teacher because she had this way of making fun of me. And I just, when it began, I was sitting next to my friend who was as bad as I was. And we were like, damn it, 15 more minutes to go. It was really a nightmare to follow that class. And she made fun of us. So if
horrible.
you didn't answer right away, she was like, wake up. She
like
was
talking down on students.
She was kind of with other students. And so I was like with my mom, what am I going to do? it's been months that I'm just not able to succeed. So how am I going to change it?
Yeah.
And so what I did, I don't remember, like, I think I had maybe the idea from my teacher. She said, well, she gave us magazines, simplified magazines, like, you know, one which is called Easygoing.
Okay.
And that's the thing you get like 4 times a year. And it has like a simplified text with images and with vocab items here. And I was reading, so she said, maybe you can like read these things and try to learn English by reading with the notes and stuff. And I began reading an article about Kyle XY, which is a series that was being made at that time. And there were other articles, and I've always liked reading. So I thought, I'll give it a try. And I began reading on my own. And actually, I swallowed the whole book.
Wow.
Book. I swallowed it. Well, it doesn't have so many pages, but I just swallowed it.
We say I devoured it. Like
That's
you ate it all up.
Thank you. I devoured it. Yeah,
but I get what you mean.
I use often, but thanks. And so I noticed I was able to read it and to understand it. So I just read the others because I had a few at home. And then I talked with my brother, who is older than me, and he told me, well, I have a few simplified books for you. You can give them a shot. And so I began reading a few simplified books in English. I read 1984 from George Orwell from the collection of Penguin Readers, and I read a few others. And I don't know how, I just began getting a liking to it. I just liked reading that way. And like something clicked, and I kept on reading books that were increasingly harder. I also began listening to things, like I began listening to music and looking at the lyrics. And I noticed that when I take my time with the material that I choose, with the method that I choose, I just liked it. And then I gave myself a goal. I've always loved Harry Potter. And I bought this kind of a box with the 7 books.
Oh gosh.
I don't know why I did, because
no small goal.
That's it. I thought, how the hell am I going to be able to read a book that hasn't been made for students? And I bought it all the same because I thought, well, why not? It could be nice on the shelf.
Right.
And when I began reading the the first book, it was difficult because of all these strange new names and
so many weird words. It's not the easiest.
When you're not used to reading that, it's just a lot to read, and to a lot of new info, not only about the story, but also about the topic and about the vocab. And I don't know how much time it took for me to read it. I think it was like 330 pages long. And I finished the book in the middle of the night. I think I had read like 130 pages in one day.
Oh my gosh.
And my brain was just powering up. I was like, I don't know, in a trance or in another like state, in trance, comme on dirait en français. And then I began reading the second one. Wow. And then the third one. And I took my whole holidays to read it. So during some holidays, I would read 100 pages a day and eat or devour an entire book in 2 weeks.
Wow. You found your thing.
And I just noticed that I loved that language, not language learning, but just the language. And I thought I was not good at languages because of my Dutch, because of what happened to me with Dutch. I did not like the language. I didn't like how it's pronounced.
Also school, like so many people don't like languages at school. That's such a common, the way it's taught, the way the teachers address people, there's just so many like having tests, being always quizzed on things. Like that doesn't happen in real life. Nobody's quizzing me when I'm reading something for pleasure or listening to a song. No one says, stop, what's that word? What does this word mean? I'm just listening for the pleasure of it. If you're watching a TV show, you're just enjoying the show. You're just enjoying the book. Nobody's gonna, give you a quiz next week on what happened. So.
Yeah, you just decide what you do, when you stop, what you focus on, how much time you spend on one type of material. Yeah. At school, it's just the teacher imposes, and you just do what they do.
And you don't pick the material. You were saying it's all about picking what you like.
Because the teacher follows a specific method that usually is related to his type of intelligence. There are about 7, 8 types of intelligences
Right.
according to literature. And so you have visual, listening, music,
Kinetic.
moving, kinetic.
Yeah.
You have different types. And
spatial. I don't have that one at all.
so indeed, you have different types, and you will learn way better with one method than with another one, and with one type of intelligence than with another one. And so many students will not be able to get learning out of the material because they will not like click to how the teacher teaches. And but what can you do about it? We have 25 students in a class, so that's it. And so we were talking at first about Easter, what happened during Easter with this talk with the teacher. And so I had begun to be into language learning quite fast. And then I knew that I also had to improve my listening and my speaking, because there was an exam coming up soon for like with speaking skills. And what I did was, so I knew that I also had to improve that, and not only reading and vocab and grammar. So by then I was I biked back home. I had 30 minutes to come, 30 minutes to go back home on my bike. And so what I did was, I've always liked to talk like to myself. And so I just thought aloud in English while biking. Just making sentences, and like, you know, when you have like a monologue, you just talk about whatever things that crosses your mind. And I did it in English. And I noticed that after a few weeks doing that every day, my my spoken English skyrocketed. It was completely different. Like I really began to form sentences.
That's great.
And actually the oral exam, I succeeded. And I couldn't believe it when I noticed that we had this conversation with my friend in front of the class for the grade, and that the teacher was happy with it. I thought, what the hell just happened? I did it. It was like the first time I was able to talk in English in front of the class.
That's so great. And I think that's a great method you're touching on that a lot of people don't want to practice. They don't even think about doing that. So I always would tell my students just to start thinking in the language, like even just to get that part is so important. But I think if you want to, you know, improve your oral skills, of course, you have to actually pronounce the words. It's not enough to just think in your head, like, oh, I'm going to go home and do my homework, make whatever for dinner. Like you actually have to say it out loud. So I think, you know, some people, if they're, you know, surrounded by people, they're not going to want to look crazy and talk to themselves, but, you know, get yourself in a private space where you can just speak, and you can record yourself and listen to it back. There's so many things we can do with technology now that, you know, maybe you don't want to. I feel like people always say, I hate the sound of my voice. And
well, you know, most people do hate the sound of their voice. I do too.
Sure. I do too. It's weird to listen to myself every week on a podcast, but I do think it is super important. Yeah, I mean, you definitely get used to it. And I think the more you do it, even if you're not showing anybody these videos, just to record yourself speaking, you know, even if it's not a video, just the audio, I think it's great. That's a really great method. And I'm so happy it worked.
We are tougher now on ourselves when we listen to our own voice. Like when I make a video in the language that I like, that I'm not confident in, but I can talk, I can speak, and I listen to it again, I'm like, ouch, am I really going to publish that? Because you're on yourself. But it's very important to pronounce the things, like to speak and not just to sing, because your mouth has to learn how to use certain muscles.
Exactly.
So of course, between when I talk in English or in French or in Spanish or in Dutch or in Portuguese, whatever, my mouth, there are things that are different. And if you never speak it, you will never get these muscles to make these particular movements. So it's essential. If you think in the language, you can improve your the speed, your fluency and stuff. But if you never speak, your pronunciation won't go anywhere.
Yeah,
so
I feel like so many people want to wait until they're, you know, at a B or whatever level before they speak. But it's like, you can't reach that B1 level without speaking in the A1 and the A2 level. You just won't, you know, you can read as many books as you want and understand whatever, you know, the hardest book, but it's you need to speak. I feel like languages are made to be spoken. It's great. You can read, you know, reading is great, but you have to do speaking, fortunately.
That's what I tell my students. I know that they are shy, but I tell them, well, how do you want to learn to speak if you don't speak?
Exactly.
You won't just come magically. You have to do something about it.
Exactly.
And even at low levels, I try to speak the language. Usually, I'm rather a person who will listen a lot, try to see how grammar works, memorize the basic words. But I do try to say a few sentences here and there, depending on if I really want to learn to speak the language fast or not. Like I'm learning Norwegian, my goal is not to speak it. I just like learning it. That's the point. I don't know anybody who speaks Norwegian, so who could I talk it to? Who could I use it to with? But I just learn it with like listening to podcasts and Duolingo, and that's fine. But for Catalan, I wanted to learn to speak it, so I watched that series, and then I had that language exchange with my friend from Haipia, who is a native speaker from Barcelona, and when we talk, it's half an hour of Catalan, and at the beginning it was very tough for me. But then with the series and with listening to it a lot and talking, having these monologues, it really began to become easier. And then we have half an hour of French and a bit of Spanish, a bit of English, a bit of Italian, so the language we have in common. I'm still waiting for her to improve her, or to want to talk to me in Portuguese to use it with her. So we have these sessions, and
Great.
I spoke Catalan with her, like even when I had still like an A1, A2 level. That's how you learn. And same thing with Portuguese. Last year I improved a lot because of pandemic, and I had a lot of time to talk with my tandem. And at first I struggled to speak for 5 minutes. Now I can talk with 1 hour with any native Portuguese speaker. So
that gives me so much hope.
That's it. It's difficult, but find a person with whom you will have the confidence, who will be patient, with whom you will have kind of a relationship, and just keep on using, like you have one session a week, and even if you have a very low level, just speak 5 minutes and then switch, like 5 minutes each language, or 5 minutes in the language you speak, which is your weak, and 10 with the person's language, which might be stronger. I have a friend who, with whom I have a tandem, and she's learning English, and I'm practicing my Portuguese with her. And I just tell her, I know it's difficult, but try. And even if it's just 5 minutes, and then we switch back, just try. Because if you don't, it won't magically come.
Right. We have to start somewhere and then build on that.
That's it. And even it's never too early. When the first time I spoke Spanish to someone, to a native speaker, it was in a metro after a month or two of Spanish classes at university. And what I said was, hola, me llamo Guillaume, estoy aprendiendo español, y that was pretty much it. Well, of course, with like my pronunciation, vocab, and grammar was shitty, but I tried. I literally had an A1 or even lower. Like the sentence I said was all I could say. And she really encouraged me to like try to produce things. We talked for 5 minutes because it was in the metro and she had to leave. But I just heard her talk on the phone. I was sitting next to her, and when she was done, I just jumped into it. I thought, try at least. What do you have to lose? Nothing. And so that's what I did. That's the first time I ever talked in Spanish. I did not even have A1. And that fueled me so much that I was on fire afterwards. And I kept on it. And
I did that at the Women in Language conference. I said I wanted to practice Italian. I was studying Italian for like 2 or 3 weeks at that point. I knew like nothing but like the Duolingo first couple phrases. But I went into the room because they put me in Italian. And I was just like, oh, buongiorno, mi chiamo Heather. And like, I could say nothing. I was just like, come stai? And like, that was like the end of my conversation. But it did then I mixed in like a million Spanish words when I would try and say anything. But yeah, it gives you a lot of like confidence. Like, wow, I just did that. I just, even if I spoke 90% Spanish and 10% Italian, like I at least tried. You have to start somewhere.
That's it. As you said, even when we mix 2 languages together, like when I began learning Portuguese, I think I had an B1 in Spanish by then. And I just tried to talk, and I knew that I was speaking this Portuñol.
Yeah, everybody
speaks it. Even nowadays, sometimes like I talk in Spanish, and they tell me that's Portuguese, or the other way around. But that's life, and that's how you begin. And then the person will say, well, you said that's in the other language, and then you're like, okay, I noticed it, I memorized it.
Yeah.
But if you never make a mistake, how do you want to learn? That's what Benny Lewis always says. I love his motto. He said once, if I haven't made 100 mistakes in a day, I'm not happy about my day. And I love it because it's so true. How could you learn if you don't make a mistake? That's what I always tell my students. I thank them every time they make a mistake. So they make a mistake and I'm like, well, thank you so much for making this mistake.
Because now we can all benefit.
I really try not to make it as if it was ironic. I'm like, it's actually not you made it because many people make it. You're not the only one. And everybody will learn thanks to what you did.
Exactly.
And I always hope that they will feel better and that I try to create this kind of atmosphere of confidence and of willingness to make errors and to try.
Yeah, that's so important.
Tell them, you cannot learn if you don't fail. And it's not only about language learning. So it's about anything. So that's why when I learn, I make a mistake, I'm like, oh, that's fine. And when people try to guide me, I'm like, oh, thanks so much for underlining that because it's important.
Yeah.
And even with very, very low languages, that's it. And so, you know, what's funny is that after that success in my 4th year, so I had reached 50%. I think my teacher gave me a few extra points to reach that 50% mark. And in my 5th year, so I was into English and I continued reading and I began watching series and movies and talking to myself in English. And I think it was in my 5th year, I finally failed during that year, I failed because I had chosen too many classes and that was too much on me. And at the beginning of the next year, so the 2nd, 5th year, we had to introduce ourselves using an item. I took the Harry Potter 5 book, which was 958 pages long. Oof. It was like a Bible. And I put it like on the desk next to me when I was in front of the class, and I said, well, I am reading this book in English. It is almost 1,000 pages long. And I'm loving it. I'm loving reading it. And so we had just 5 minutes to talk. So I just was very fast. And I said, so now you know, I am the guy who loves English. And everybody was like, who is this guy? Like, what's wrong with him? Yeah. Because it was just, for me, English was not a course. Yeah. It was a life. It was a language. It was a life. It was a passion. And so I began, my level really went like from A1 to B1, B2. By the end of my secondary schools, I think I had reached a high B2, beginning C1. I had read about 20 books in English before going to university. Wow. And my grade in my 4th year, my grade was 50%. In my 5th year, it was already 70. And then we went on to the 80s. And the exams in my 6th year was 95%. I was one of the best. And English was my life. I was only reading in English, like Twilight, Harry Potter. I also tried with The Lord of the Rings, anything I could find. I only read in English, and
Has that stayed with you? Has that phase stayed? Because I had a phase where I only read French during my undergrad. I only read in French for like a few years, and now I've gone back to reading in English.
Well, it's still a language I use on a daily basis, even with a trying to, because so many videos on YouTube are in English, series and books. I do less because I still have books to read in English. I put them on the side because now I am maintaining 9 languages. If I want to read, I will want to do a bit of Italian, a bit of Portuguese, Catalan, Esperanto. There is only German that I don't really practice because we all have a language we don't really like that much, and for me that's German.
Yes,
that's a question of preferences, and it's some people love German, I don't. Some people hate Spanish, I love it. Some people hate English, I love it. It depends on people.
Yes, everyone has. That's so true. It's the least favorite, unfortunately.
So that always depends on the people. And so what's also funny is that when I was about 14, I began writing stories. I discovered I liked writing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my 5th year, I began writing a book in English.
Oh, wow.
And I finished it before going to university.
Oh, wow.
So that was the first part. I finished it at that point because I knew that once I began with university, I would not really have much time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finished it there. And it was not big, like 60 pages, kind of short.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it was a real story with characters and with
yeah, that's
like
great.
a real thing, just not very lengthy, but that's it. And I love writing it. Sometimes I would sit on my desk and write 2 hours in the middle of the night. I just loved it. I've always liked writing, and I've written later on. I've written also in Dutch. I made short stories in Dutch, like made to learn with explanations about grammar and vocab and stuff. And I wrote 24 short stories, which are about 250 to 500 words. They are all on my website, free to use. And I've
give us the name of your website in case people want to check it out.
Yeah, so that's especially interesting for those who want to learn Dutch and who can understand French, because everything is explained in French. So you can practice both at the same time. So it is called Caméléon des langues.
And I will put that in the show notes.
So chameleon, like the animal. And so
chameleon.
my goal is to become a language chameleon, but well, I still have a few languages to learn before that, but that's like a lifelong objective. And so on that website, I've put a bunch of things in Dutch. So 25 short stories, plus I've translated 150 Fuck My Lives, well, from the French Vie de Merde.
Oh, okay.
Also made explanations to how people understand. And I've begun last week to make videos reading and explaining these VDM, mainly in Dutch with a bit of French, to make language learning material, because people prefer to watch a video than reading something. And then I also, well, something that is useful for all those interested in a bunch of languages. I've began to, well, a few years ago, I began to gather language learning resources. So basically on my website, there are articles for about 15 languages. And every time I find a resource, be it a YouTube channel, Facebook page, a book, like journals, translators, websites to find tandems, whatever, vocab, grammar, everything and anything, I put it on the website. So for Dutch, I have more than 100 resources.
Oh, wow.
About 95 to 99 of them are for free. A few of them, like Link or Buzu, that kind of things that you sometimes have to pay for them, I put there because I think they're important. Like Link, it is a very, very good language resource.
Yeah.
And so that's why I put it there. But most of the things are for free because I mainly use free things like YouTube and stuff.
Yeah.
So you have things for like all the languages I've studied. I don't speak them all because I'm not at 15 languages yet. I'm in 9. I am learning 2 more. But it's my goal is also that, for example, I've done a bit of Polish, but I don't speak it. I've not done anything with Polish for 5 years, but I did do 3 months of ASIMO.
You and I should do an exchange. You can help me with Italian, and I'll help you with Polish.
That could be interesting, but I know that Polish is one of the hardest Slavic languages. So when I learned it, when I discovered the case system, I thought, how do you learn that? Like it doesn't really follow rules. You have to
context
learn it by heart.
In context, yeah, it's a lot of.
And I did kind of give up because of the enormous amount of things I had to memorize at once. And I honestly.
I would have if it wasn't for my husband. I don't think I'd still be studying Polish.
Yeah,
so I understand. Yes, I have
a reason to learn it.
It is a tough language.
But so I still have resources for like Polish, Russian, Afrikaans, that kind of languages that I've tried, but I've not gone to the point that I can speak.
So that's the end of part 1, and I do apologize as I know I cut it off a little bit abruptly, but part 2 will be out soon so you can continue with this conversation, and you will hear lots more languages right at the beginning of that episode. So I hope you're looking forward to that. Thank you guys for listening, and as always, if you can share this on your social media, I would really appreciate that. And a rating and review is the best gift you can give a podcaster, so please consider taking a few minutes and doing that if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much, and we'll be back very soon with part 2. Take care.